Thanks for tuning in today. I'm looking forward to this interview with Dr. Bobby Conway. Let me read to you from his short bio. Bobby Conway serves as lead pastor of Image Church in Charlotte, North Carolina, and is well known for his YouTube ministry, Christianity Still Makes Sense, formerly known as the 1 Minute Apologist, which was just great. He also serves as a co-host of Pastor's Perspective, a nationally syndicated radio show on KWVE in Southern California. Bobby is the author of several books, including The Fifth Gospel and Doubting Toward Faith. He holds a PhD in philosophy of religion from the University of Birmingham in England and resides in Charlotte with his wife, Heather. They have 2 adult children, Haley and Dawson. Well, welcome, Bobby. Man, it is great to see you. And I'll tell you what, I love this guy because he's authentic. He's got a heart. I love his heart. I love his personality. I love his hair. Hey, Bobby, thank you for coming on.
Oh, Mike, man. Well, I love you too, bro. Feelings mutual, and it's so good to be with you, buddy. We've known
Well,
each other
thanks.
for quite a while now.
Man, I don't remember when the first time it was. We met at a conference, I think at
Yeah,
Charlotte, right? That
that's
Alex
correct. Yep.
McFarland, our mutual friend, put on. And you came up to me at that point. I mean, I was just kind of starting to get some name recognition in the world of Christian apologetics at that time. You came up and congratulated me and introduced yourself, and we've been friends ever since.
That's right. Yeah, got the opportunity to go to, um, South Africa with you and watch you do that debate there with William Lane Craig and as well. And so that was just such a neat time. And you were such an encouragement in my life through just my PhD pursuit and then also my struggle with doubt, just being that friend that was there for me that understood something of that as well. And I'm just, again, just so thankful for the opportunity to jump on with you here and delighting in your success as a great scholar. God's really using you, buddy.
You're kind, man. You're really kind, brother. Yeah, it seemed like I do remember we were on that safari in South Africa discussing, you're wondering whether you should go for a PhD.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. And yeah, you kind of helped me a lot with that. And it was, Dr. Craig encouraged me to do that as well. And, I thought, boy, as a pastor at the time doing 1 Minute Apologists, I look back, I go, I don't know what it amounted to, but it was helpful for me to go through that process. And I think having been through, a DMin and then a THM at Dallas Seminary and then Bible college, I felt like I was bred in the evangelical world. So to go to Birmingham University in England and just kind of go through that process, I felt like I wanted to do whatever I needed to do to be prepared so that, I, I remember someone saying once, oh, well, he's just been bred by the evangelicals. And I'm like, okay, well, let me go through the university then. Like whatever. I just wanted to be as equipped as possible. So I do appreciate that. And that was your passion as well, to be trained and scholarly. And I'm so thankful for that advice.
Yeah, well, you and I do have something major in common, and that is we both occasionally struggle with doubt, and
Hmm.
we're open about it, which I know is kind of frustrating to some believers.
Yeah.
I know my dad, God bless him, he was a great man, but he never could understand why I would experience doubt. It's Mike, I
Mm.
didn't bring you up that way. Well, yeah,
Mm.
you didn't, but this is just the way I'm wired.
Yep.
It's my personality. It's not just my faith that I doubt at times. It's everything.
Hmm.
But you and I
Yeah.
have been open with it. Did, do you find that? I mean, I found that a number of people just don't understand doubt or could understand us why we experience doubt at times. Have you sensed that as well?
From some people, yes. By and large, because I do speak on the topic quite a bit, I have been surprised how many people have been thankful that I've opened up about it. But at the same token, that I didn't walk into progressive Christianity or walk away from it, because it really took it out of me. I mean, I ended up with a lot of suicidal ideation because I felt pressures with my platform in a growing church. And so at times I felt like a fraud, because I'm just trying to do this thing. But I was like, I felt irresponsible to step down from everything I'm doing just because I'm having doubts. I hated my doubts. I didn't want my doubts. They kind of just came to me as I was studying. I wasn't looking for doubts. And I found that it was challenging for me, but I felt like if I come to a conclusion that Christianity isn't true, then I need to have the integrity to walk away from it. But God helped me through it. But I do feel like Christianity didn't make sense. So, like in my new book, Does Christianity Still Make Sense? I It didn't make sense in that long season, Mike. And what happened is, I mean, I ended up on antidepressants. I ended up seeing a counselor, uh, but I came to a place where I was able to find my way again. And I'm so thankful. And when I share that story, I think that people need to hear stories like yours and mine, people who doubt but still believe, because it's like a lot of the stories that get lifted up are, it's like you got to become an apostate, like to get to get a voice on your doubts, and it's like we want to be able to show that you can have doubts and still hang in there as a Christian.
Yeah. You mentioned about your new book. I'd like to talk about that. It just came out. I don't have it yet, but I mean, I love the cover. Does Christianity still make sense? A former skeptic responds to today's toughest objections to Christianity. It's really interesting. And this book just came out, right?
It did, yeah, 2 weeks ago
Wow.
with Tyndale.
That's
Yeah.
that's cool. Well, I browsed through the table of contents. I'm looking forward to getting a copy of it. Table of contents. I'm just going to read a couple of the chapter titles, just a few of them. Why are there so many scandals in the church? Why don't churches hold their leaders accountable? Aren't most Christians homophobic? Does God really care if I get a sex change? Why are so many Christians racists? Why are Christians so obsessed with pro life? Now, these aren't the typical objections that you'll hear from an atheist or agnostic scholar. That's not the kind of stuff that scholars typically present as the objections. But these are the kind of objections that are very common today on college campuses,
Hmm.
just amongst people's colleagues wherever they work. Is that right? What made you? This is unique in the way it is doing Christian apologetics and addressing these objections that come up. They're kind of emotional objections rather than the intellectual ones, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe even, as you put it in the book, from what I understand, they're more like cultural objections rather than the
Yeah.
intellectual ones because our culture has moved away from Christian ethics. Can you talk a little about this?
Yeah. So, Mike, what I kind of more like an intellectual biography. It's put out through Tyndale Elevate, which is kind of more their academic side of things, and it's an audible fashion as well, where I read it. But I start kind of in the shallow waters, and I share kind of my story from non-belief to belief to doubting my beliefs to belief again, and I walk people through kind of my dark night of the soul, what that was like for me, and then I go in and I start addressing um, 20 plus objections, and some of them are the timeless objections, like the problem of evil and suffering, or how can Jesus be the only way? But I deal with a lot of the stuff that our culture is experiencing right now with the shift that we're in, and then simultaneously it seems to have impacted the church. And so I kind of go in the shallow waters and work my way to the deep end, where we do get to the kind of the scientific objections and stuff in the final part of the book. My heart was to just help people to, number one, the audience, for those that might want to be equipped on how to offer answers on some of these big objections that are out there right now. Number two, to help the person that might be on the fence. And number three, for somebody considering Christianity. I believe this is the biggest apologetic question of our time, Mike, whether somebody can articulate this like this or not. And that is, does Christianity still make sense? Because every apostate came to the conclusion that no, it doesn't make sense. Every time we're doubting, we're asking, does this make sense? And so I feel like by packaging this book in this way with so much apostasy, so many people on the fence, and so much church confusion, I think that this question is kind of ruminating in the soul of many. And I wanted to create a tool that came along with a study guide as well that could help people to navigate their way through this difficult time that we find ourselves in.
So when you say it comes with a study guide, is this for use by groups, or is the study guide for individuals as well? How does that all work?
Yeah.
Is that it's a
Yeah. In
separate
fact,
product, or is this?
it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a
Okay.
separate product on Amazon. So small groups can use it. Moms and dads can use it with their kids. My son and I even did, if they were at Tyndale, they can get the video series where my son interviews me, and it's a Gen Z Xer me and being interviewed by his Gen Z son. And he's talking about the biggest issues of his generation. And so it's just a collaboration for student ministries, for small groups in general, for moms and dads. If they're just looking for a practical tool to equip their kids with the Christian worldview, it will provide food for fodder as they go through the study guide along with the book and then the video series as well, if they're interested.
Well, that's pretty neat. I guess you got some experience doing like a study guide when you did the series on the 1 Minute Apologist, and then you came out with some. You came out with something on like a video series with a study guide too, right? Was that 1 Minute Apologist, or was that another
Yeah,
project you did?
I've done several of those. And then I interviewed William Lane Craig, and we put out a study on his book On Guard,
Okay,
where
that's
that
the one I
was.
was thinking of.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. He flew into town for a few days, and we put that together for him. And that was, boy, that was 10 years ago or so.
Wow. Now,
Yeah.
there is one group that is probably growing faster, one demographic that's growing faster in Western society than any other group. It's not
Mm.
Islam, it's not atheists. It's a group called the nuns, people who don't embrace any worldview.
Yeah.
Talk about the nuns. Why do you think that's growing? Who are they? Like this demographic, who are they primarily? What's it primarily consisted of, and why do you think people are moving in this direction?
Yeah, so the nun's kind of like spiritually agnostic. You know, they've left maybe the roots of Christianity, or perhaps they never identified with any belief, and that's all it refers to is those without any religious affiliation. So a lot of them might say, "I'm spiritual, but not religious." And I think it's important for us, Mike, to understand the cultural context that we live in, a secular, pluralistic culture that's influenced people in such a way that they don't want to land on a particular belief system. So these would be people that are more anti-creed, anti-confession. Live your truth, you do you. That would be kind of the motto, right? Like, let's just, eat, chia seeds and burn incense and grow our own veggies, and I'm fine with that, right? Make your own clothes if you want to do that. Playing with crystals, earthing, grounding, sitting Indian style, palms up, getting centered. Uh, these would be the kind of difference of styles that you'll see with people. It might have a Buddhist influence to it, but it would be non-doctrinal, um, very sweet natured. A lot of them, are very open to being mystical. So you'll have that camp of people that would be a part of the nun. So it's not a kind of group that you're going to be able to pin down. And so we just live on in a culture that's different. We're seeing what I would refer to as the first wave of apostasy. There was a time
Mm.
where the culture shared the same values as the church, and that's no longer the case. So when church is no longer cool, we're seeing that first wave of people leaving. You've got another wave of apostasy that I think you'll see once persecution starts hitting the church. And then in the meantime, you've got people trying to repackage Christianity to make it more palatable for the culture. And so the culture they look at, and we're heavily influenced by LGBT stuff, identity issues. We've got a growing list of pronouns. I mean, it's incredible. I think about the young kids in this world and the 4,000% increase in uh, teenage girls struggling with gender dysphoria. Can you imagine like sitting around with just a dictionary, Mike, and trying to figure out what your gender is, reading all these definitions, and then once you might commit to one, there a new definition might have been added. So there's no sense of solidarity to their identity in this community. You got critical race theory, all other forms of critical theory, cultural Marxism that we're seeing on campuses. There is a complete deconstructing of our nation right now. And a lot of people, even inside the church, are wanting to deconstruct the Bible and go with that as well. And I think that we got to figure out, how do we navigate through these difficult times? People are going, Christianity doesn't make sense. Culture tells us it doesn't. And so we got to make it make sense to the culture. And I think that's fine if we want to make sense of it, but not without making it say something that it doesn't.
Yeah, I think we live in very scary times. I truly think we are witnessing the decline of Western civilization.
Absolutely.
Civilizations rise and fall, and I think we are in the midst. It's sorry to say, but I think we're in the midst of the fall of Western civilization, and it's an anti-intellectualism that is going on. That when the stuff about genders and so many things that are being done today that are just so counterintuitive. It goes against all logic.
Yeah.
I mean, things with our open borders. I mean, it's not like saying, well, you can't have immigration, but I mean, you do. Anybody you know, within reason are going to say you got to do it legally. Even if you're going to expand what was going on before, you still have to do it legally and not just let anyone in because there are so many bad actors who would want to see us destroyed. But look, I'm the son of an immigrant. My dad immigrated here from Honduras, so I'm not against immigration, or else I wouldn't be here. Um, but there's just common sense things, and
Hmm.
I was on the campus of Oregon State University last year and last spring, and I walk into the men's room before I'm to speak at an event, and there's a basket in there in the men's room with condoms and um, tampons. I'm thinking,
Oh,
wow,
geez.
yep, welcome to the left coast.
Yeah,
And
right.
people are thinking they're cats in schools, and we just cater to them. It's like, okay, well, you're a cat. I mean, I think the answer to that is, all right, you think you're a cat? Well, here's some cat food. You want your litter box? Here's some cat food. This is what you get to eat
Yeah.
from now on. I think they would be divested from their delusions very quickly if that's all they had to eat. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I agree with you. It's a very scary time. You mentioned persecution. I think it's coming. And I
Hmm.
think we as Christians need to prepare for it. Notice what the Chinese church, underground church, try to learn from them, because I think we might see it within our lifetime.
And that's such a scary thought, to think about, because it just seems like such a foreign way to consider the way we used to understand Christianity in this culture, but how fast it's happening. And you're right, there is such a lack of intelligence. You have people that are hyper activists, but they don't even understand the philosophy that's driving their activism. You've got just this lens of oppressed oppressor, and everything gets overthrown. But then you go apply that same thing with the borders to universities. Okay, well, you're oppressing me because you're not letting me in. Don't we want to have a policy? So if we would have a policy to let somebody in as a university student, how much more as a citizen of the country? And it's almost like it's completely wheels off. We've got people, on this gender deal, I don't think they really believe it. I think that they're, I mean, like if I just said, excuse me for a second, Mike, and then I went and put a dress on, came and sat back down and said, I now am a woman. Nobody would believe that, right?
Hmm.
I mean, it's like that's just it's absurd. And now that's not to minimize the fact that there is a small percentage of people that struggle with true feelings of gender dysphoria.
Sure.
Um, and 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 I think in some ways, I mean, I can't imagine what that would be like. That's really really hard stuff. My heart goes out to people like that, but I don't think that we fix the problem by saying, well, just go ahead and get a sex change. I think in the same way that you wouldn't tell an anorexic to just, yeah, you're right, just don't eat any more food. You look fat as a cow. You wouldn't say that, right? I
Right.
mean, you would truthfully just say, let's there's something wrong. And so now, because we're so influenced by Rousseau and be authentic to your feelings, well, we don't question our feelings. Live your truth. Feel whatever you feel is true. And so I think feelings is a great way to destroy a country, and it's happening right before our very eyes.
Yeah. So, and I'm so glad for your book because it does help pull people back so that they can face north again, or at least keep people facing north, people who are committed to truth. They haven't gone out on the wacky side yet. Now, back to those that are part of that group of the nuns, called the
Yeah.
nuns. Why do you think that is so appealing to folks today?
Well, I don't think people like the idea of being boxed in, for one. I don't think that they like the vibe of the church. Number two, people that have left, and understandably, I mean, I address it at the beginning of the book, the church scandals, the hypocrisy. That's a difficult black eye on the church, but it doesn't discount the church. As it's been said before, just because somebody plays Beethoven bad, uh, we're not going to say that Beethoven is bad. You just blame it on the person playing Beethoven bad. Sometimes we play Christ bad. Sometimes we don't
Mm,
represent him well. That doesn't get rid of the credibility of who Jesus is. It just shows that we're failing to live up to that standard and that we've got some hypocrisy in our lives. But I do think that people, if they can move away and say, hey, we're part of the nuns, it might feel better to them to feel like they don't have to, uh, you know, have a set of categories or whatever that they feel bound to. But really, we're just kind of creating God in our own image. We can't just sit around and think up who God is and in hope that that we can create Him ex nihilo just because we think Him to be like He this. Uh, God it has revealed Himself to us, and then we have to uh, take what has he done to make himself known to us, how has he sought to make himself known to us in conscience and creation through special revelation, and then we deal with conforming to who he says he is, not the other way around. But I get the pressures. I mean, it's like who wants to be isolated, who wants to be quarantined. We want to fit in. It's like in Vincent van Gogh's Starry Night. And when you look at that painting, it's uh, just obviously everything's lit up, the sky, the little village. The only thing where there's not light, it's in the little church. It's as if Van Gogh was saying he's not
mm,
finding hope in the church. And
mm.
I think that that's a sad indictment when you look at Starry Night. I'm finding hope in creation, I'm finding hope in the city, but I'm not finding hope in the church. And I think that's the kind of time we're living in. People are trying to find hope in what the city and culture has to offer them and what creation has to offer them, pure materialism, but they're not finding hope in the church. And I think that they're not going to find hope in the church if we are trying to fit in like everybody else. Jesus says, you are the light of the world. In other words, the world's dark and we're supposed to stand out. We're to be distinct. You're the salt of the earth. In other words, you're to be a preservative in a culture that's rotting out. You're to live different in the way that you know handle your life. But what we're trying to do is not stand out. We're trying to fit in. And that's unfortunately a lot of what many people think evangelism is just fitting in. And so we do everything we can do to fit in. Well, I'm not for like going out and being abrasive by any stretch. And I'm not up for, dressing Amish either. I think that we can fit in the way that we dress and in that way, but the way that we live and our set of values need to be distinctly different, because that's how people can get turned on and drawn to Christ. And so I don't buy the whole narrative of like, here's what we're hearing about many people think they're really getting free. And I think we are at the end of civilization. Great civilizations look a lot like America does right now, highly sexualized, lots of civil animosity and a lot of anarchy, breakdown of the family. This is the kind of stuff before the culture falls, but people tend to think that they're being ultra liberated at this moment. But I think that we are creating our own gallows that we're soon going to hang from in the name of freedom. And we're not as free as we think, because here's what I can guarantee. While we can go out and talk about the gospel, and if we start with like things like sin, well, the culture's legalized all that stuff. So that changes. Like if we just go up and talk about those sins that we used to be able to just talk about, the culture would agree on. But now they
Mm-hmm.
think there's nothing wrong with it. So instead, I think we need to start with the consequences. And the culture is not going to tell us the consequences of the decisions of people that they're making right now, because they don't want to be found out for their bad worldview that it doesn't work. But the consequences are this: let's get rid of marriage, right? Well, why? Because we are so addicted to our sexual appetites. We've made everything about sex that we don't even think we can be faithful to one person. So now let's be polyamorous. I mean, like we're just everything's about sex. We're obsessed with our genitals. We're just in this culture where it's falling apart right before us, and I think that there's consequences in people's life. I don't believe for a moment like doing drugs and alcohol and taking massive bong hits all day and sleeping around with everybody that's not causing pain. That was the life I lived when I was saved out of it, and the consequences were horrific. And just because we say that it's fun and we're getting free, well, they'll talk on the front end, but let's hear the consequences. And I think that's where the danger is.
Yeah, well put, well stated. Um, Scary times. You, of all these objections that you deal with, or you come in contact with people offering these, what would you say are the top one or two that you're facing these days?
The biggest objection by far is everything as it relates to LGBT stuff.
Mm.
Um, that has influenced our culture. It's the air the emerging generation breathes. We have been so marketed, like that. I'll even say, boy, emotionally, I can feel it for the same sex couple. But I'm going. I can't take the scriptures and make the scriptures submit to my feelings.
Hmm.
So I give the benefit of the doubt to the scriptures, and I just submit my feelings to scripture in the same way that, like, look, I wish that I could tell Muslims that they're going to heaven, and I wish that I could tell atheists that they're going to heaven. Well, I can't do that, even though my feelings would like to say that. I have to I have to be honest about what the Bible says, and so I have to have the scriptures. I have to submit my feelings to scriptures. Similarly, I can't broaden what marriage looks like just because I feel for people's tension in that way. But I think that at the end of the day, we're all having to carry a cross in a certain way. But because sex is an idol, and because we've reduced our identity down to our sexual preferences, we are expected to celebrate this or be canceled. And I think that we're all having to carry a cross. I can't drink alcohol in moderation. I wish I could. I wish that I could have a nice. I wish that I could drink a couple shots of whiskey every night. I love whiskey. I just can't do it. It's going to go right. It's the cross I bear. I have to deny myself in this way. And there's many people that might be gay that they can enjoy, alcohol in moderation without turning out the way that I am. Well, we all have a cross to bear, and we can't take away we can't redefine what sexual ethics looks like just because the culture is pressing that on us. And so my fear is that we've been love shamed as a church. I people talk about we're homophobic. Mike, I've been a Christian 30 years. I don't think I know of a single Christian. I'm not saying that there hasn't been that. There has. But I don't know of a Christian that I can think of that wouldn't have agreed that we need to be loving. In fact, I think Christians bend over backwards to show love, so much so that many have compromised what the Bible has to say just because they believe it's the only way that they can show that they love, that they believe, okay, and this is Satan's perfect pitch, right? Oh, you don't love me unless you celebrate. Oh, wait, I'm called to
Mm.
love. Oh, okay, well, then I must need to celebrate this. And what we're doing is we're letting the culture define the terms of what love is. And we can agree, we can love people without having to agree with them. We do it all the time.
Yeah, yeah. There's the cultural feelings about love. There's no such thing as a tough love, I guess you could say, right? It's always give in to it, and
Yes.
maybe that's why we have so many students today and young adults who feel entitled because the
Yeah.
parents have given into them and given them everything they wanted and raised them as their friends rather than being a parental authority in their lives. Well,
Mm.
okay, we could go on talking about that stuff for a while. That's really interesting, though, that the number one kind of objection that you're finding has to do with the alphabet group, the LGBTQ
Yeah.
stuff. Um, what would you say to those? So, okay, you dealt with the homophobic thing. Um, what would you say to those? I guess we could kind of wrap it up with this. What would you say to those who would say that Christianity doesn't make sense anymore? Kind of like the
Mm.
title
Yeah.
of your book, of a
Yeah.
previous book. Um,
Yeah.
what would you say to those?
I would want to say that I can understand that it doesn't make sense at times. Like there are things about Christianity that doesn't make sense to me. So I write a book called Christianity Still Makes Sense, and there are things that don't make sense to me. And in fact, the most difficult area where I got hammered in my own personal doubts was in the bizarre world of the ancient Near East, of just all the things that at times it was like, okay, Shamgar taking out 300 people with an ox goad, Naaman dipping in the river 7 times, Ezekiel laying on his side for 390 days while he plays with pots and pans, flips over and gives God another 40 days. Joshua and his crew walking around the walls. And I would find myself reading this and going, oh, sons of God and daughters of men and talking serpents. Like it was just hard for me on an intellectual level. And I felt like, am I just being utterly naive here? And that was the part that didn't make sense to me. And I started thinking, oh, man, I needed an apologetic for the absurd, for the seemingly
Mm,
ridiculous. And I guess it would boil down to, I think in some ways that is a sub theme of the Bible, that God invites us into the ridiculous. And when we follow him by faith, then he comes through for us. And in coming through for us, he confirms his leaders. So he invites Moses to lead his people out of Egypt, and they run into a wall of water, and it just seems absurd. And then God comes through. Or Joshua faithfully walking around the walls, or Naaman, go dip. It's like as if God wants us to do things because he's asking us to trust him. And
mm,
so it's a sub theme of the Bible that God, and Christians that I know, I think about one guy that shared the story that God told him to buy a bus, and he is like, "What? You want me to buy a bus? Why do you want me to buy a bus? Makes zero sense." He's like, "Yeah, just buy a bus." So he went and he bought a bus, and then he's driving around in this bus, thinking, "Why do I have a bus, God?" It's Greyhound bus. And then one day, a choir group knocks on his door out of nowhere, and they inquired about the bus and they wanted to know if they could use it. And then he said, God told me give them the bus. And so all of a sudden, what didn't make sense made sense. You know, Christians are filled with stories like this where God invites us into the nonsensical and we trust him. So I think the thing that helped me more than anything, though, Mike, it's your expertise, it's the resurrection. And it was the just reasoning, like you would talk about, or like Dr. Habermas would talk about. If Jesus really rose from the grave, then he really did die. And if he really did die, he really did live. And when he really did live, he said he was going to die and rise. And he validated the Old Testament, the law, the prophets, and the writings. And he said he was going to send his spirit that would send more truth. And so if Jesus in his first coming validated the Old Testament and the process of that, then given his death and resurrection that he prophesied that took place, well, then I can trust that in his second coming that he'll also validate the process that the New Testament came together. So from the death, burial, and resurrection, from the gospel, I could go backwards and trust where I could wrap up all the little trials that I would have in the Old Testament and just say, look, if it was good enough for Jesus, then I'm willing to trust. That doesn't mean I still don't study. I still don't do my homework, but it's good enough for me. And I could do that the whole time. And so basically the way out of my doubt was the way into Christianity to begin with. It was trusting in the simple death, burial, and resurrection of Christ. It was having faith like a child in the simple gospel and realizing that the church was blowing up and growing for the first decade and a half without the single book of the New Testament. How are they doing that? They were loving God, loving people, and celebrating the gospel. Great commandment, great commission living. And that's what I told my kids. I said, when I was a young Christian, I thought a mature Christian was one that could argue all his doctrines quickly. And I prematurely committed to doctrinal beliefs that set me up for a future crisis of faith because I wasn't considering the alternative positions. And those prematurely committed positions got knocked down, dismantled, and down the road, I kept reading these different views, and that process of being undone that much, I told my kids, enjoy learning. Don't try to conquer it. Know that there's lots of different views out there. Don't be shocked by it. Just take your time learning them, be informed, and in the meantime, do what the early church did. Love God, love people, celebrate the gospel. Great commandment, great commission. That kind of mindset, along with the resurrection, and he died, then he lived, that whole process is what helped me more than anything.
Man, that's good stuff, Bobby. Man, this
Yeah.
is going to be a great book, something that a lot of people are going to enjoy. Does Christianity still make sense? And this is good. This is going to do more than just speak to the mind. I think you're going to be speaking to the hearts of people. And
I hope so.
I hope a lot of people buy this book. If you're a viewer out there, buy this book, read this book. This will bless your soul. Bobby, thanks so much for your time. The Reverend Dr. Bobby Conway.
Mike, it was great to be with you. Thank you so much. And I will say for anybody that's listening, it's almost like we feel like we always got to qualify this, but the reason on the LGBT thing, the reason I talked as much as I did about it is because it is the biggest question that comes up, and it really doesn't have anything to do with love. I've got friends that are part of the LGBTQ community. I really do, and I love them. It's just saying that I don't love them because I'm trying to be faithful to the Bible. It's an unfair thing to ask of us to give up our conscience. It's neither wise, as Luther said, nor good. So that's all it is. We're just trying to be faithful. And I don't think we should ever live in a culture where we force people into believing what we believe. And neither do I think we should force our Christianity on people. I think we should just live it and love people well, and that people could see that, wow, there's a difference that living for Jesus can make, and I'm interested. Thanks, Mike, for having me on.
Yeah, thanks so much, Bobby. Appreciate it. Love you, man.
Love you too, bro.